What's up? April here, and welcome back to The Struggle is Real, my YouTube channel where I do movie and TV reviews for your pleasure and mine. Today I'll be reviewing episode 1 of AMC's Interview with the Vampire, based off of the novels within the Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice. Disclaimer off the bat, I have not read any of the books within the Vampire Chronicles. That would include Interview with the Vampire, The Vampire Lestat, Queen of the Damned. I've only seen the movies. I've seen Interview with the Vampire and I've seen Queen of the Damned, but I'm not going to use that as my basis for this show, mainly because it may or may not be correct. So I don't know anything about the source material. Please don't come for me in the comment section. So the premise of this show, and also what I assume is the book, is that a vampire by the name of Louis Dupont du Lac is being interviewed by a journalist and giving his account of his life thus far as a vampire. Now, Louis was turned into a vampire by the vampire Lestat du Lion-Court in the early 20th century. And so it takes place in around 1910 in New Orleans. And now what the show does pretty successfully, I'd say, is set up that time period in America for the main characters. I don't know what the source material has for Louis, but I assume that he's not black. And in this show, Louis is very much a black man living in New Orleans, the south of the United States, in the early 20th century. So there's still very much elements of racism, classism, and all of the isms coming into play in the beginning of this show. And Lestat being a white man, that relationship is already very much forbidden. Just them having a base level relationship is already kind of frowned upon. And the trailers of this show alluded it to be something more, which I will not spoil. So off the bat, the show does a really good job in creating a setting for these characters, which is early 20th century New Orleans. Interactions are basically business transactions or very give and take relationships. So the moment that Lestat comes into play and wants a relationship with Louis that is not typical of what a white man is demanding around that time is already looked upon as strange. So it's interesting to me how the show kind of depicts that. I mean, we all know that Lestat ends up turning Louis just because the title of the show is Interview with the Vampire, so obviously Louis ends up becoming a vampire. No spoilers there, that's just the name of the show. But the way that Lestat goes about turning Louis into a vampire is very, very interesting to me, because as Louis is recounting all of the early times with Lestat when he was still human, it almost came off as him being courted, like someone would be courted by someone of romantic interest. He was showing him all these luxurious things and how life could be when people respect and love and appreciate you, and that's not something that Louis was necessarily used to in his life in New Orleans in that time period. All of his relationships with other white people and even black people around him were very transactional. It was give and take, push and pull. Nothing was coming from a source of just pure honesty and love. And when Lestat comes into the picture, this is kind of the first relationship of that caliber that Louis is really discovering, and it makes that relationship all the more alluring. So I think what the show is setting up is almost kind of this need and desire and wantingness to be loved, and that's the reason why Louis decides to make these decisions to stay with Lestat and continue the relationship, even if it ends up being draining or damning or hurtful to his life in general. Obviously, because the show is taking place years into the future when Louis is willingly being interviewed by a human journalist, we know that his relationship with Lestat might not have gone all the way as he planned. I don't know. This is just episode 1 and I'm just speculating. But from what I've seen so far, I think that the show has a really good direction. And in terms of the cast, it is really nice to see the main character of Louis, who's being played by actor Jacob Anderson, in a new light. Because typically we've seen him before as Grey Worm in Game of Thrones, where his character was much more subdued, under orders, very strict and militant. Whereas this character of Louis is full of emotion and radiant in both anger and rage and lust and all of the spectrum of emotions that one could go through, both being a human and turning into a fledgling vampire. So it's nice to see him as an actor push into that new character. And I'm really interested to see what the rest of the cast has to give. And I'm also interested to see when they introduce the character of Claudia, who was previously played by Kristen Dunst in the movie that came out in the 90s, a very, very frightful young child that tormented a lot of people in that time period. I'm interested to see the direction that they go with that character and how that plays into Louis and Lestat's relationship moving forward. Anywho, thanks for joining me for this review of Interview with the Vampire. If you're interested in watching this show, it comes on AMC on Sundays, but I will be here reviewing every episode as I go along watching it because it seems like a pretty interesting show. If you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more movie reviews, TV reviews, and more content in general. And for The Struggle is Real, I have been April, and I'll see you real soon. Peace.